Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Kartikeya Sharma and the NXT Summit for the invitation. We're all honored to be here with all of you. I'm going to dive straight into the subject of our panel to talk about the New World Order and the regional perspectives on it. Over the last 2 days of the summit, there have been several speakers and discussions that have referenced the New World Order. Speaking about the New World Order as though it is something that actually exists. Now, of course, the deterioration of multilateral institutions, the rule of law, global governance, that has been I would argue, a decades-long deterioration. I worked for the United Nations almost 30 years ago. There was talk then about reform of the United Nations. I know that there has been criticism of other international organizations as well. Where I'd like to start is really to frame our discussion about what the New World Order is. We can start with you, Pramit.
Okay.
Are we in a New World Order? We can perhaps agree that the old order is gone.
So I think we're in a new world disorder as we're transitioning from a post-World War II structure that we're very familiar with to something we're not very clear where that's going. And at the heart of it is, as the Indian Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, has said, that the two superpowers, the United States and China, in effect will no longer underwrite the global order. They are no longer prepared to try and keep it or invest in ensuring that it develops, that it runs on the basis, if you would call, a rules-based structure, and no longer prepared to invest in multilateral systems beyond a certain level. They are now extraordinarily, should we say, self-interested. Prime Minister Modi, when he speaks in Hindi at least, refers to a world of selfish powers. And in that system, therefore, what does the rest of the world do is the question I think almost every country is asking. And he laid out, Dr. Jaishankar laid out in January last year in the Palkiwala Memorial Lecture, that India would pursue a strategy of middle power cooperation, something we've now seen echoed by a number of other similar countries, most prominently the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney at Davos later in the fall. So for India, I think it's reasonably clear. We're now looking especially at a relationship with Japan that has really been accelerated with the Economic Security Initiative signed in the fall of last year. We've now seen a huge pivot to Europe. We've seen the heads of Germany, France, Ursula von der Leyen, Poland, and so on come to India in just the past 2 or 3 months. And the FTA that we've been talking about is really the first step in a much larger degree of integration we'll see between Europe and India. The Canadians, a country that's been on the fringes of Indian thinking, will now be brought in. We'll see the FTA be done by the end of this year. But again, we're looking at much more. And then beyond that, we'll be looking at a bunch of tier 3 nations, which are important, each of them bringing something to the table. This includes Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Australia, and you can go on. India is working its way through all of them, and they are doing the same thing across the board. This doesn't mean you get rid of the superpowers or decouple from them, but you basically hedge your bets in a new international order or disorder because you're not quite certain who is going to be where. As Dr. Jaishankar said, we will no longer have alliance cultures in the world anymore where you are with one country 100%. You will have a set of frenemies. You will be friends with that country, or you will agree with them from points 1 to 5, be neutral with them from points 6 to 8, and then 9 and 10, we violently disagree with them. And that's just going to be the way nations are going to have to work together.
So you mentioned at Davos that Prime Minister of Canada Carney spoke about this New World Order and a call or an appeal to the middle powers to look at the world as it is rather than as we wish it would be. and calling it, I think, a new world order. If you could comment on that, Jason, are we in a new world order, world of disorder? What's the framework that we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Shira, and Pramit, fascinating what you have just recounted. And let me also just add my own thanks to Sri Kadashia Sharma for hosting this conference. By the way, it is head-spinning to sit in a conference like this and go from a discussion about cancer care to artificial intelligence regulation to trade, and now to have this discussion about the new world order. First of all, I'm trying to remember what the old world order was like, because we have been a messy planet for as long as there have been human beings on striding the earth. And when I also think about what's happened just in the 8 decades since the establishment of the United Nations, when we were supposed to try to put in place a certain degree of order in the world, a certain degree of international law ruling the behavior of governments, we have seen again and again a breakdown of that order with the Vietnam War and the Congo-Rwanda conflict, which displaced 7 million people, and the Iran-Iraq war, and on and on and on and on. So it's not as though we're entering into a new world order that is going to be somehow more disorderly than what has come before. It has been a mess for as long as we can remember. I believe, just as Pramit has said, that yes, it is. We have to face the fact that we have 2 superpowers, or 2.5 superpowers, that are governed by strong-willed, unrestrained leaders who are pursuing agendas that do not necessarily follow the script that we've all been taught has to be followed. Breaking things. We have in the United States, of course, January 3rd of this year, the Venezuela action by the United States. We have what commenced on February 28th in Iran. But of course, it wasn't only the United States that has broken this pattern. We had Russia invading Georgia in 2008 and seizing Crimea in 2014, and now, of course, what's happened in the last 4 years, full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So we are in a very dangerous time, a very precarious time, and again, a call for focusing maybe less on a world governed by these 2 superpowers and more on the necessity, as Pramit was just saying, to focus on middle power, regional cooperation, partnerships. Certainly the India-Israel relationship is an important example of that. The India-Gulf relationship, there's now an FTA with the GCC and other steps that are being taken to expand those regional partnerships, breaking away from the idea of the world being governed or misgoverned by the great powers.
So let's take that further. If we are in a position of, or a situation of transition, we're not yet in the New World Order, whatever that will be, if there ever is any order. As you rightly pointed out, the last decades have seen many breaches of the world order. Whatever situation, whatever you want to call it, the situation we're in now and foreseeable future. We'll start with you, Jason. You have been traveling to the Gulf region, to the Middle East, to Israel for decades. How do you see the situation, or this, I'll just refer to it as the New World Order, impacting developments in the region and particularly with Israel?
I think it's really exciting what we've seen over the last number of years. But I don't want to ignore the positive reality of the relationship between India and the United States, which has been in an upward trajectory for decades. Even with challenges from time to time, and of course the tariff issue, the taxation issue has been a difficult issue. But going back, the India-U.S. Civil Nuclear Agreement of 2008, that was a strong relationship, a milestone of that strong relationship that we are seeing continue to strengthen from administration to administration in a bipartisan way. But going to your question about the region, yes, the IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, which on this stage a year ago, AJC had a chance to discuss with some of our friends and colleagues from the region, is another example of that changing dynamic of India and neighboring countries working on common problems together, seizing opportunities together. The India-Israel relationship, which was, again, on full display in the Prime Minister's visit on February 26, 27, where you have now the prospect of a very significant increase in the defense relationship between India and Israel, but also 16 other agreements that were inked in the course of that visit. Another strong bilateral or regional agreement that is flowing from this new reality that we're all facing in the region.
Pramit, could you comment on the regional impact of that, and perhaps also address the relationship between India and the Middle East region?
So we're seeing, as part of this middle power reaction, which sometimes incorporates, or the falling apart of the multilateral structure as we know it, you're starting to see experiments in minilateralism, plurilateralism. So, for example, the most famous one that India is involved in was the Quad, which was India, Japan, Australia, and the United States, looking at cooperating on strategic technologies at the heart of it in response to concerns about China. And as Jason correctly said, you saw the United Arab Emirates decide that I need something in my Persian Gulf area, so I create ITU2, which brings in Israel, the United States, and India. Saudi Arabia produced a complementary version called IMEC, which brought in the European Union as well. And these were built around connectivity, but fundamentally it was about building a regional architecture. And now now the number of sort of trilateral, bilateral agreements moving into these different areas is now really head spinning, partly because nobody's quite certain which one will succeed. It's literally an experiment. We create them, some of them will die. The BRICS, which is almost a joke when it was created, right? Vladimir Putin just read the Goldman Sachs report and said, oh, let's create a body on this. I attended a couple of those summits with our previous Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and I remember on the airplane flight, he was an economist by training, and he said, this is a ridiculous organization. You can't base it on a report by an investment bank. That's not how the world works. And today, suddenly, the BRICS is becoming a reasonably important organization. Still got deep divisions, but it's now clearly part of the international firmament. So you're seeing all of these, and that's just the multilateral side of it. You're also going to be seeing, as some of the other speakers have mentioned, on the technology side, you're seeing the divisions on where do you go on AI regulation, where do you go on data flow, where do you go on undersea cables. A huge part of global infrastructure now today is about how do you defend and build undersea cables, for example. And it goes on, and these layers that are coming in, little bits and pieces. I think Carney had a word for it, I think regional strategic geometries or something. But a lot of other governments have the same thing. So you're seeing that putting together and then trying to see which ones work, which ones complement each other. And if you're lucky, the superpowers come in and say, actually, we like this. We'd like to support this as well. And that's where you're going to be going. And you'll notice that, according to media reports, the American National Security Strategy, the unpublished section, talks about the creation of an E5, which would be the US, China, Russia, Japan, and India, where you basically have 5 largish countries, which are not the traditional P5 countries of the UN, acting as a sort of international coordination body. Now, at the Munich Security Conference, interesting, the Chinese popped up with their version of it. I think it was a Core 5, which was very similar, minus Japan, however, because they're not a great fan of the Japanese. And same, so you're seeing, again, experiments even by the superpowers. How do you rework an international system that clearly is not working right now?
So the last year may have seen an acceleration of the deterioration of international institutions and rule of law, but the U.S. still plays the U.S. does play a primary role. Could you talk a little more about the role of the United States now and what you expect it to be? Still, it's not an ally. There's no alliance between India and the United States, but it is a very important relationship for both countries and regionally here. Could you comment on that?
So I think that we're now, we finished a going back to the George W. Bush Jr. administration, there was a famous statement by Phil Zelikow, who was the U.S. Secretary of State's senior advisor, where he made a comment, he made it at a press conference, he said, the United States believes that the rise of India is fundamentally a positive to its own strategic interests, and America will invest in doing so. Now, you saw at the Raisina dialogue recently, Landau, the U.S. Deputy Secretary, said, actually, no, we're not going to invest in your rise, but we'll maintain a relationship, but America will no longer in the business of building up other countries, because we've had a terrible experience with China. So that, in many ways, brackets a specific 20-year period in which the U.S. and India were strategically very deeply converged. But what America is saying, that we'd retain a relationship, but it becomes more transactional. And that's where we're going to be going now, and that's the new relationship we'll be defining. It'll still be very important. America is our #1 strategic partner in terms of all the economics, FDI, FII, remittances, the biggest Indian diaspora and most successful one in the world. And even Trump, with all of his concerns about our trade policy, is very clear. Modi's my friend, and India is the country I still want to work with.
Can I just add something to Pramit? I know we're running
Please,
out of time.
and then I'm going to ask you one more question.
But it's important to recognize, as you know, that U.S. policy is not only the policy of the current president, it's a long arc. And we've had, unfortunately, because of our democratic system, lots of changes in U.S. foreign policy. But the long trajectory of the relationship between the U.S. and India is solid, and it will continue to grow. And we will continue to work on that in partnership with our Indian-American friends.
Thank you. One more question? Okay. Could you reflect on the same question but applied to the Middle East and especially to Israel, the U.S.-Israel relationship in whatever transitional period or new situation we're in?
Indeed. I mean, it's an alliance of democracies, shared values. It's going through a tense time right now in public opinion in the United States, of course, in light of the last 2.5 years of war. But the fundamentals of the relationship, very strong. The U.S. and Israel both have similar needs and concerns, fears about the region, want stability in the region, want peace in the region, want to expand the Abraham Accords that were put in place in the last year of the Trump administration. We're continuing to work on that, as you know very well. And that is going to continue even as we go through this very complicated time. The war in Iran will be over. The region, we hope, will be more stable in this post-war period. We'll still have issues to deal with, but the long-term interests of the Gulf and of the Levant and of Israel and the United States will continue to move in the same direction, I believe, by the way, I hope in concert with India's interests and concerns and the opportunities that India will seize in the region.
Finally, could we talk about the India-Israel relationship, which both of you have mentioned in different contexts, the importance of that? Recently, Prime Minister Modi was in Israel for a very successful meeting. I think there are 9 or 12 agreements that ostensibly came out of it.
So one of the key elements I think we're now seeing with Israel, it's recognized within the Indian establishment, is that it is now becoming our #1 dependable defense ally. Whether you go to almost every conflict we have had with India, Pakistan, India, China, including Operation Sindoor last year, Doklam, Kargil earlier, it has been Israel that has been the first responder in every single case. Russia has also been there, but it's really been Israel that has done more than anything else for us. And in many ways, Israel may not build fighter aircraft or warships, but every single one of our fighters, aircraft and warships has key Israeli components, weapon systems, and so on. We just did a poll recently with the German, the Friedrich Naumann Stiftung on Indian attitudes to the rest of the world, and it was striking that Israel, when it was asked who is your most dependable security ally, Israel was #2. Russia was #1, but for a younger generation, Israel was actually way up there. So that's one element of it, and that's going to be very important in an international system that will be increasingly violent. The second part, and it's important to realize that one thing Prime Minister Modi knows about Israel is that it is the water superpower. And in a water-distressed nation like India, Modi privately has said, there is no country that is more useful for India than Israel when it comes to water. They are the best in terms of any kind of water technology, recycling, wastewater management, even detecting leaking pipes. They're a quantum level higher than everybody else. And then finally, the technology side, which is again the startups and so on. Israel, as you know, is actually superior to India in many ways in that front.
Right.
And then lastly,
last word.
On not only on water, on energy, on food production, on the agricultural centers of excellence that Israel has set up around India, that I believe in the latest visit by the Prime Minister will expand from, 46 to maybe 100 over the coming years. Mm-hmm. So the opportunities are vast in that relationship between India and Israel.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.